Hey everybody, Happy New Year. Hope you all had a fantastic holiday. And what I want to do is, for the very first video of the new year on my channel, I want to talk about a band that I don't think I've talked about before. They're a band called Big Star. Big Star, they are definitely one of my favorite bands, and they're kind of a band that goes under the radar a lot. They're from the 1970s. They are from Memphis, Tennessee, and they released 3 albums in the 70s that are some of my all-time favorite albums, and just very guitar heavy and very melodic, great vocals, just an all-around excellent rock band. And they're also kind of known as the godfathers of power pop, the genre power pop. Now, maybe you're not really aware of the power pop genre, and if you're not, that's okay. But it is a pretty popular kind of like sub-genre is what I would call it. And it's basically just melodic rock music is the best way to describe power pop. And these guys definitely fit that description. Now, I wanted to talk about their 3 major albums released in the 1970s. Now, they did go on to reform, I believe, in like the 90s, and they released one more album that I don't have on record, but I have the CD of it, and I actually don't like it all that much. But really, their main time period was the 1970s. And the first record they released was in 1972, and it's this album, and it's probably their most famous album as well. And this is called Big Star #1 Record. Now, it's got a ton of songs. I think every single song in this album is amazing, I gotta say. From the start of the album to the end, every single song holds my attention, and I just love it so much. There's the back. Now, this is a reissue. I don't have an original pressing. Now, I don't have an original pressing of any of their albums, and there's a reason for that. So, and it also goes along with the reason why they're not bigger than they should have been. Originally, they were on the Stax record label, and of course, Stax was known for their amazing R&B and soul records. And the band Big Star was signed to Stax, but unfortunately, it was signed to Stax at the kind of the tail end of Stax as a record company. So they didn't have as much money to promote, and they took on this band Big Star, which was a full-on rock band. And they just kind of didn't know how to handle the band and didn't know how to promote the album or basically anything like that. And sadly, when the album came out, they didn't print enough of the album when it first came out. So there actually was a pretty good buzz around the band when they came out, because radio stations liked the songs. They were playing them on the radio. They got some great reviews in a bunch of like music magazines, I think like Rolling Stone and like maybe even like NME in the UK. So there was a lot of buzz about Big Star, but you couldn't find the album. You couldn't find this album, which makes it hard to find original pressings of the album today, of course, because back then you couldn't even find it. So finding it today is almost impossible. So the next best thing is to get these reissues. And this, like I said, this first album is pretty much up there with some of the best debut albums of all time, along with like the Beatles' Please Please Me, Oasis's album Definitely Maybe, the Radiohead album The Bends, or actually not The Bends, Pablo Honey. I misspoke there. There's just, think of all the best debut albums ever by like rock bands, and this is up there with all of them. And the other thing about this album that's kind of interesting to note is the song In the Street is a song I'm sure all of you have probably heard, even if you don't know about Big Star. In the Street was later re-recorded by 2 bands, but most famously by Cheap Trick, and used as the theme song to that 70s show that was released in like the 2000s. That 70s show, the show with Ashton Kutcher and you know the cast, right? But they used a Big Star song as their theme song. So even if you don't know Big Star, you probably do know Big Star. So anyway, this is their album, first album, #1 record, which I love a whole lot. Now their second album, I should mention that the members of Big Star, before we go on, you have Chris Bell, And Chris Bell is this guy right here. Chris Bell, Alex Chilton, and I think that's Alex right there. Then you got Jody, what's his name? Jody Stevens, who's the drummer, and he's right there. And then the original bass player is Andy Hummel, I think that's how you say his name. And he's sitting right there. Now, the main writers and singers of the band are Alex Chilton and Chris Bell. Now, for those of you who don't know, Alex Chilton was the lead singer of the Box Tops. The Box Tops were, of course, a 60s band, and their most famous song was The Letter. And Alex Chilton was only, I think he was 16 or 17 years old when he recorded The Letter, which was a #1 song. So he'd already had, success in the music industry before Big Star. But it was him, Alex Chilton, and Chris Bell on this first album that they co-wrote basically every song on the album, and they both sang the songs on the album as well. And they were very inspired by the Beatles, Lennon McCartney, so they wanted to have a songwriting partnership like Lennon McCartney, which is why this album is so great, because they really modeled themselves after arguably the best that there was. So, yeah, just want to give you a little backstory about who's in the band. Now, for their second album, Radio City, and this is my favorite of the Big Star albums, the Chris Bell quit the band right after this first album, and he quit the band for a number of reasons. First off, because it just was basically a failure. The band was not making any money. There was a little bit of buzz, but then after the buzz, they just kind of faded away. And so he became really depressed. So his depression drove him away from the band as well. And he got really into Christianity. So he went off and did his own thing, which I will talk about in a little bit. But then the band carried on and they recorded this second album. So the second album just features Alex Chilton, Andy Hummel, and Jody Stevens. And it's my favorite of the Big Star albums. It is so just has its own unique sound. I was trying to find the right way to say this. It's an electric sound. It's just in your face rock and roll, and it's so wonderful. Again, every single song I love on this record. And it has probably my favorite Big Star song, which is a song called Oh My Soul, which is the very first song on side 1. And it's just a very unique rock song. And I recommend all of you right now go to Spotify, go to YouTube, wherever you can stream music, and listen to Big Star Oh My Soul. The guitars on there are some of my favorite guitar sounds of all time. Just excellent, excellent sounds. And this album does not disappoint. It's a really, really cool album. I also love the artwork. I think it's a very cool shot. And then, of course, the back is a very famous shot as well. Shot at a TGI Fridays, which is kind of interesting to note. But yeah, just a very, very cool record. And there's also another song in here that was kind of, that was a hit later on. There's a song called September Girls. And I think, I could be wrong, maybe the Bangles covered September Girls. Some band from the 80s covered September Girls. I don't exactly remember who. But September Girls is their other kind of like big hit song that everyone knows about, but doesn't know that Big Star were the band behind it. But yeah, just a great album, Radio City. Just love it a lot. Again, this is also a reissue. This is from like the 90s, I believe, because original ones are almost impossible to find. Moving on. So this is their last album of the 1970s, and it wasn't even really released in the 1970s, I don't think. Maybe it was released in 79. But it was recorded in 1975, and it actually didn't even start out as a Big Star album. So basically, after Radio City, the same thing happened with their first album, where the album was released on Stax. It didn't really do anything, and you couldn't really find it. It was a whole just case of things going wrong. The band had the talent and the songs, but they just didn't have everything else going for them. So the band kind of went their own ways, kind of split up, and Alex Chilton, this guy right here, decided to start maybe recording maybe a solo album, maybe another Big Star album. He didn't really know. He just went into the studio, and with the original drummer, Big Star, they both started recording a bunch of songs, not with the intention of calling this project Big Star at all. I think they were going to call it like Sister Lovers or something like that, which is another interesting side note because both these guys were dating twin sisters, which is why they were calling it Sister Lovers. That was going to be their new band project name. Instead, though, they recorded all these songs, and they were very, very kind of just way different than the other Big Star albums because a lot of these songs are very, very moody, and they have a bunch of kind of avant-garde aspects to them, but they're still great songs, so don't let that scare you off. By the way, this is called Big Star Third, I should mention. And there are multiple different album covers for this album. This is a later release on the Four Men with Beards album, or Four Men with Beards label. I should warn you, that label, I do not like. Almost everything they put out is usually semi-bootleg, and it usually doesn't sound that great. This is a huge exception. So first of all, this album is really hard to find, but for some reason, somehow, Four Men with Beards put this out, and it sounds excellent. This is, in my opinion, the best pressing you can get of this album without having an original pressing from like the late 70s, which I think was on some kind of weird label. And I've never heard the original pressing because it's so hard to get. But this album, like I said, is very unique, very interesting, and basically it was just all the songs they recorded for this album. They recorded them and kind of left them alone, and then later on, another label bought the original Big Star label that Big Star was on, and then this other label released the songs as this Big Star Third album. So it's kind of a weird album in a way because the band wasn't really 100% behind it, and you don't really know exactly what songs were meant to be on here or what songs were not meant to be on here. Either way, I still love it. I think it's a fantastic record and a very, very unique sounding album as well. I should mention that all three of these Big Star albums released in the 1970s are all considered like some of the best albums ever released, and I don't usually go by these lists, by the way, because I think they're kind of bogus. Sorry about the light coming in, by the way, through the window. I know it's kind of causing a glare, but I can't avoid it. But these lists, like these Rolling Stones best albums of all time lists or whatever, which are usually garbage in my opinion, but they do have all three of these Big Star albums on that list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. So take that for what you will. But I also have a couple of more Big Star albums as well to share with you. So this is an album called Big Star Complete Third Volume 1 Demos to Sessions to Roughs. And it's basically, like the title says, a bunch of demos and rough mixes recorded for this Big Star Third album. And this is a double album released by Omnivore Recordings, and it's an excellent, excellent, excellent record. Now, I got this for I think I got this for $7, brand new. It was in a clearance record pile, and I picked it up, and I should have picked up the other volumes 2 and 3. They had them there as well, but I just picked up this one because I wasn't too sure about it. But I hope to one day get volumes 2 and 3 as well. But just kind of honorable mention, Big Star album. Very, very kind of cool. And the last one I want to show you is this. This is called Big Star Nothing Can Hurt Me, and this is from the soundtrack of the documentary that is about the band Big Star that I highly recommend watching if you have any interest whatsoever in Big Star. Nothing Can Hurt Me is an amazing documentary all about the band's history, all about the songs and what happened to each of the band members. And it's just a fascinating tale, a tragic tale, to be honest, because, it's really, at least for me when I was watching this documentary, it was like, it's so hard to see these people with so much talent and such great attitudes just doing everything, in my opinion, to the best of their ability, but not getting that recognition they deserve. And they didn't really get it ever in their lifetime, not even until much later. Like in the 90s, there was kind of a resurgence where all these underground people were discovering Big Star and were really liking them a lot. But they never had that, even fame along the lines of like a I don't know, like what's a 70s band that, not like a Led Zeppelin obviously, or like an Eagles, like nothing like that high up, but like a band like America. They should have been as big as the band America. That's kind of where I would place Big Star in the sense of like commercial status. Like they probably would have had maybe 1 or 2 number 1 hits and had some really strong albums and been able to tour, much like the band America. But this album, this compilation album from the soundtrack, is really, really great. And it has a song on here from Chris Bell, who I mentioned earlier, who was on the very first Big Star album. He went on to record a bunch of songs for a planned solo album. And he actually released a single from the album called I Am the Cosmos. And it's an amazing song, and that song is on this soundtrack. Now, you should definitely look up Chris Bell, I Am the Cosmos. It's an amazing song. And it's just got so much going on in the song, and it's one of my all-time favorite songs by anybody. It's great. So definitely check that out. And they put that on here on this compilation. So again, you should definitely check out Big Star and definitely watch that documentary, Nothing Can Hurt Me. It's on Netflix right now. I don't know if it's still on Netflix, but I think it is. If you can't find it on Netflix, I'm sure it's somewhere else on the internet. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about Big Star, and I would love to know in the comments below if you also love Big Star, and if you own any of their albums, and maybe you own a first pressing of one of their albums, and if so, how does it sound? I would love to know. And the light's really coming in crazy over here, so I should probably end the video pretty soon. So anyway, Big Star, fantastic band, highly recommend them, and that's it. So I hope you all have a fantastic new year. Lots of exciting things happening with my website, needlemeetsvinyl.com, and lots of new records to discuss. And I am going to be making a Beatles video talking about the Beatles album Yellow Submarine soundtrack, or song track rather. And I'll be posting that video probably, if not this weekend, sometime early next week. So stay tuned for that. And that's it. Take care, and bye for now.